Hello again. So this is video number 10, and this is just going to recap videos 7, 8 and 9, which are like a little trio on their own because they go into the more intangible aspects of anxiety, like thoughts and emotions, things that are difficult to look at or see or touch, to be able to know what to do with. So video 7 was about facing and feeling emotions as something that is really beneficial for a pathway out of anxiety, because unfelt emotions are a lot of the time, not always, um, what causes like an internal pressure leading to anxiety. So undealt with emotions and the thoughts that are generated from those undealt with emotions can be really problematic, pressurized. So going to the roots of the thoughts, which in this case, in this series, my opinion based on teachers I've had, is down to unfelt emotion. And it's when we start clearing emotion that we can make progress with anxious thinking and the release of that. So this can be difficult because people find it uncomfortable to face and feel emotions, not just acknowledge them, but to actually sit through their energetic resonance, to sit and feel how uncomfortable it is to hold an emotion such as sadness or grief, anger, any of those things. This is why we don't do it. So it's worth mentioning when I'm saying face and feel the emotions as a start for help with anxiety, that for some people there may be a lot there, and this might not always be easy to do alone. I mean, essentially the work is done alone. Nobody can feel your feelings for you or your emotions. But during the time of going through that, it is worth looking at groups of support, people that you can speak to, maybe forums on the internet. There's plenty, there's billions of groups that revolve around well-being, meditation, yoga, lots of other practices. There are support groups, counseling groups, and things of that nature, where it's good to be amongst people and to be able to identify with other people and share that too. That's not in itself what's gonna um, do all the work. The work is to be done on an individual level, but sometimes the strength of the emotions and literally how much of it is being packed up for so long may be difficult to go through alone. So that is worth thinking about. But just on the actual mechanism, a little word on that again of, and this is just going over what we've already done, so I'm not going to do it in detail, but I wanted to give some sources, some other mechanisms, some other processes and programs that use this. This isn't just something that's just been made up, or it's a flash in the pan. This is a process which has been used for thousands of years in many forms. A book that really helped me, an author called David Hawkins, he's wrote extensively on this whole topic, not just with anxiety but the emotional state, and how to achieve clarity, well-being, freedom from uncomfortable thinking and things that are holding you back. And one of the books that he wrote was called Letting Go, which is a simple process that he recommends, which is exactly what I'm talking about. It's feeling exactly what it is that's there. It's witnessing it as much as you can possibly witness it. So that's just one thing. It's worth looking at that. But the same process is evident in a practice such as Qi Gong, you know, a practice which has been going thousands of years now, comes from China. Qi Gong basically means working with energy, which specifically means the energy contained in the body. And there are certain practices within Qi Gong which involve grounding the emotions. So, moving emotions through the body, moving blockages of energy through the body. There's lots and lots of different practices, but it works on the same principle. If people are familiar with the 12-step fellowship, which is started as AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and is in a number of different anonymous programs now. Again, the work involved in that is the same in various parts of working the steps, and in continual life, it's all about checking in with what's coming up, feeling it, letting it go. Surrender is a term that comes up quite a lot in these kind of things. Similarly, if you go on a Vipassana retreat, a Buddhist style retreat, it's all about spending as much time as you possibly can witnessing what's happening in the body and learning to become the observer. And in so doing, again, massive clearance being achieved. So, these are just a few different methods, but it gives you credence for me when this process is evident in lots and lots of different methods, if you like, that span thousands of years. So it's definitely something that works. So video number 8 was about being stuck in thought and about thoughts being sticky, and what is it that makes thoughts sticky? What is it that makes us more unable to detach? And putting it generally, the more we think, the more we spend time thinking in the head, the more the thoughts carry weight, and the more difficult they are to detach from. The more that we come entwined with, or the more that we identify with the thoughts that we're having, we start to think ever more that we are our thoughts. And even when we try to detach by some of the methods that I've spoke about, it can be really, really difficult. And it's how to manage the mind, in the sense of what are we doing with our mind as we go about our business, which is causing that to become more intense. And I mentioned social media and a lot of the activity on there, and in periods of anxiety during this pandemic, watching the news too much, because all of that activity, it's sparking off even more thoughts, even more trains of thought, even more pathways to have to follow in terms of a thought chain, and they're in turn are sparking off more and more, and it's this constant proliferation, of thought, which becomes more and more difficult to detach from. So if we have a day like I did, which I mentioned, just on the phone all day, catching up with news, getting distracted on social media, when we do aim to sit down and do a bit of the practice and come into the body, it's really, really difficult. So we have to manage that. We have to be aware of what can tie us even more firmly to our thoughts and make the journey out of anxiety more difficult. And then video number 9 was how we can determine or define, what's actually happening when we can't get away from thoughts, or anxious thoughts more particularly. and I threw into the mix the definition of addiction, the modern one, which is something, some kind of behaviour that we're trying to stop but can't, and that's so that applies to, as well as the many different kinds of addiction there are, to alcohol, drugs, sugar, technology mainly, which I missed out last time, but is a massive one. But then, that applying to thought, anxious thought, it's uncomfortable. We don't want to have it. It scares us. We actually want to get away from it, but we can't. What's going on there? Well, it fits the bill of addiction, which might throw up certain connotations and people might be uncomfortable with it. But it's drop the connotations and just see it on that modern definition, that it's something that we're trying to get away from but can't. What that does, that exposes the problem with anxious thinking. And it exposes them thoughts as things that are not to be believed. When we can see something like that as an addictive process, and the thoughts aren't us and they're not there to serve us, it gives us some headway in knowing that we can be a separate thing from our thoughts. It's also worth mentioning that as we try to detach from thought, there will be difficulty, much like there is in addiction, because the body or the mind is always is used to it and wants to go there. It wants to have the thoughts that you've had previously, and you trying to put a stop to that. There's resistance. The thoughts have an energy momentum of their own, and they want to be fed and want to carry on. The body actually has a chemical makeup based on the thoughts and emotions that you've had that wants to keep being fulfilled, and again will provide resistance when you no longer want to do that. So it's worth knowing that the difficulty with this is to be expected, but that's all that's happening. You're slowly pulling away from something that wants to keep attached to you. It can actually be explained neurologically as well, in terms of how the the brain is made up in terms of its neurological makeup, the actual physical components in the brain that when you have a thought or an emotion, pathways are built in the brain, and the more you have that, the stronger they get, the stronger and more intricate and intertwined all of these little neurons and pathways start to form. So in order to come away from a thought or a thought process, what you're doing is unraveling all of that brain structure that you've previously created with all of that thinking beforehand. And so you can't do that all at once. It's chipping away at it, over time. That's where the practice comes in. That's where the daily sitting down for however long it might be that you find is helpful comes in, because you bit by bit slowly chipping away at these huge chunks of neurological matter in the brain that have all been formed on the back of the thoughts and emotions that you've had, which manifest as neurological structures in the brain. So, I don't like to get too scientific about that, because it can send us all back up to the head again, which is really where we're trying to come down from when we're releasing or detaching from anxious thought. And that's a really good place to leave the video, because the next video that I want to do is about literally how we come down from the head to the heart, which sounds like a cliche, but it's absolutely not. It can be proven scientifically. I'll speak a bit about the science, but we won't focus too much on that. You can do that if you want, but I'll give you the reasons why it's not always too much of a good idea to focus on that. And again, it's about, where are we putting our attention? Are we putting it on our head, in our thoughts, and our intellect, or are we coming down? And when I say coming down and moving from the head to the heart, this is where your gratitude practices and stuff like that come in. As soon as you get something like that going on and you're able to shift your attention for a while from all this mental activity to a different place, the benefits are amazing. And there's millions of gratitude practices out there, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next video. But for now, I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it's been a while since the last ones, but yeah, so that concludes video 10, and I will see you in the next video.